everyone we we are now live on May 6th, the day of our Cinco de Mayo, but that's okay. For the NDILC Speak Out number 6, we are live on Facebook, and thank you very much. We actually have 2 from the West Coast and 1 from quite not the East Coast, so thank you very much. We are very light today, and our prayers and thoughts first and foremost goes out to all those that are affected by COVID and continue to be affected by COVID. Some of our NDILC members are affected very heavily by that, so we thank you and our prayers go to them. So thank you very much for being on the call right now. So what I wanted to do real quickly is that I wanted to talk about what's going on and what we can do with this very incredible topic about Speak Out. And I want to read something about the first of all, let's talk about the NDILC. We started in 2005, dedicated to raising the number of women leaders and growing women's employment and empowerment at all levels in the housing ecosystem. Our council comprises several executive women and several senior executive women, works diligently toward gender equality and obtaining equal opportunity for women across America. So speak out. Unconscious bias is present, but ignoring it only perpetuates it. Take a stand and speak out. So we're all dressed in purple. It is my favorite color besides gold. And I believe that the royal purple is something that we can be very bold and proud. We always have red for women. So one of the reasons I picked the color purple. So according to Wikipedia, implicit stereotype in social identity theory, an implicit bias or implicit stereotype is the pre-reflection attribution of particular qualities by an individual to a member of some social outgroup. Implicit stereotypes are thought to be shaped by experience and based on learned associations between particular qualities and social categories, including race and or gender. Individuals' perceptions and behaviors can be influenced by the implicit stereotypes they hold, even if they are sometimes unaware they hold such stereotypes. Implicit bias is an aspect of implicit social cognition, the phenomenon that perpetuations, attitudes, and stereotypes can operate prior to conscious intention or endorsement. The existence of implicit bias is supported by a variety of scientific articles. The idea was, this was first defined by psychologists Massathan, Bajanji, and Anthony Greenwald in 1995. I would have thought this would have been a lot earlier, but really that's only been 25 years. So that thought was in there. So what I wanted to start this off with is get the definition out there. But if you think about what we went through pre-March 2020 and now, how does that being affected differently? Because we're more virtual than we are in person. So when we think about speaking out and we're thinking about, having, hey, you're in a room or someone says something that, we're looking at and say, did you realize you said that? When we're in a boardroom, yeah, we can call it out a little bit easier, in my opinion, because we're physically there and everyone can sense it. But when we're on a digital format like this, how do you know if someone's really paying attention because of side distractions versus then when we're in the room? So I'd like to start off with Tasha with that question. You are a digital, you're the Chief Human Resources for all of Officer for Dialpad. You're hiring all these incredible people. You've doubled your size last year, and now you're already 200 more employees this year. I mean, 25% improvement in quarter. I mean, that's mind, craziness. So that being said, you're doing these interviews versus an in-person. How does that, you're looking at that as an environment, how are you making sure with your software? I know it's incredible. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Actually, one that I've been thinking about more and more recently. So I don't think Dialpad's software per se helps sort of bubble up unconscious bias. I can't make that assertion, but what I will say is that the AI that helps to understand sort of sentiment of our meetings and tone, that's a really interesting part of Dialpad's, platform. So that is something that happens. It's like our call coaching feature. And so Dialpad's product allows us to sort of understand in the moment how we're coming across. It sort of tags at this point, it's sort of words that may not be appropriate that you've used, you may not know that you used. So we're working towards, broadening those sort of base words that are concerning words, beyond just sort of maybe offensive words, but words, traditionally offensive words, swear words, but beyond that, to like slang that may not be appropriate. So I think there's really interesting things in the product. Your other question about like, how does sort of being remote and virtual versus being present and together in sort of conversations, how does that impact unconscious bias and our ability to identify it and react to it and sort of check ourselves on it? That's a really good question. And to be honest, it's not something that I have a good answer for. I will say that my general thought on unconscious bias is that, like, in my mind, and I'm curious what you guys think, it's so important for us not to think of this as a conviction. You've done something wrong because you have unconscious bias, or you're admitting to yourself, or you're seeing patterns of thought and behavior that shows that maybe you do have a bias sort of against a particular group. Or these things are like natural, and they've occurred through like decades of experiences and value systems taught down from your ancestors and parents. So I think the first and foremost thing is like, let's not make it a conviction. Let's say like, this is a natural thing that happens, and let's work to identify how it happens and to help reprogram ourselves. So that's my general take on unconscious bias. So I'm working really hard. Our team, like Dialpad, works really hard to say, this is not something that we should cower away from. It's something that we should be bold in and identify as something that just naturally happens. And how can we change our behaviors so that we're aware of it, especially when it comes to interviews, right? Interviews, it's very common for people to naturally hire the people that are most similar to themselves. And so we really push at Dialpad a diverse interview panel for that very reason, so that feedback from a diverse group of people are what inform the hiring decisions, so that it's not just a hiring manager who says, okay, that person looks and acts just like me, or they went to the same college, or they live around the corner. Kind of all those things come into play naturally. But when you have a diverse group, I think you're naturally helping to fight off some of that unconscious bias.
That's a great response. I mean, the fact that you, like you're saying, you have a diverse group, that way you don't know who's going to be doing the interview, and each one is going to have a different thing that resonated with them. And based on a grading system or something like that, that you could come and say, okay, I didn't see that in them, or I didn't notice that when they were talking, especially when you don't get to see the body. Some of us, very agitated when we're talking, or we're not focused on a conversation because, they might be in a room like Tammy's in an airport right now. She's not able to get on the call because she can't think because of so much noise and being a distraction. So if you had that during an interview, that would be a definite thing that someone would say, oh, they're being distracted. They're really, got these qualities that are good, because sometimes the environment where they're at home or whatever, which is very interesting. So love that. So same question for you, Teresa. I mean, you think about from the real estate standpoint, you're hiring agents to come in, you're working in corporate America, how you're dealing with that. So from a fundamental standpoint, what makes it different from because you're doing B2C versus B2B in some of your places, what is that like different for you?
Well, first of all, thanks everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be on this, and I love this topic. And you're right, Desiree, it is pretty new in the industry, unconscious bias. In fact, I don't think many of us were really looking at this subject until about 2 years ago, right? Seriously, kind of really understanding what unconscious bias was, how it affected us, and how we actually interact, and what are the things that we can do once we learn about it to really stop those microaggressions, which happen on a regular basis, right? Things that we don't even know that we're doing, that we are actually doing to people, that happen in the business place. It also happens with our customers and the clients that we serve. So, one of the things that we look at is really training and providing that education on a regular basis for those people that may not be aware of what implicit bias is, what conscious bias is. Same actual thing, right? It's got all these different terminologies, but it means the same thing, which means that we form, and typically out of flight and fear, it's something that even happened millions of years ago, right? But in our own environments, we form those stereotypes that we don't even know are being formed based on, what Tasha was saying, like generational backgrounds. But even it starts as early as, as a child who is seeing the environment, the culture that they're around, and forming those stereotypes that are preconceived notions of things, and they're therefore then become prejudices and unknown scenarios that then affect their everyday way they react to people or the way they think about things. Here's an example, one that I think is so amazing. So we have a coworker, one of our coworkers her sister is a mechanical engineer, for example, and being a mechanical engineer, her husband actually is the stay-at-home father. Their son is about 7 years old, phenomenal in math and science. And one day family members came over and he had just gotten A's on all his report cards in the math and science. And they said to him, "Oh my God, so when you grow up, are you going to be a mechanical engineer just like your mom?" And do you know what he answered? "Oh, no way. That's women's work." Now think about that. Think about the bias that now he has developed, thinking that that is women's work, because that's what he's seen his mother do. And his father's actually the stay-at-home father and serves him. So those stereotypes, how we think about things, really form at a very young age. So how do I see this? How does it affect in the workplace? How does it work with our business? Is that it is a constant. It happens regularly. It happens in every scenario when we're dealing with clients. Here's another example. We had one scenario where we had people that were waiting. Today's marketplace, is a very tight inventory market. And one of the agents was actually holding a real open house. And there were people waiting to tour the open house. And there were people that were, like in line, 6 feet apart. And there was a couple with their agent that was about 5 back from the line. The agent that was hosting the open house walked over to that couple and said, and they happened to be Black, "Oh, by the way, we're only taking cash offers. We're not going to be taking any FHA loans." All right. Now, so think about that, right? Immediately assuming a bias that this couple who actually were cash buyers were coming in to look at an open house. He goes, "So it's going to be very competitive. So you might as well not even look at the open house because, if you're going to use FHA." So that assumption, it affects us on a daily basis. And we really need to start to train our minds, just like Tasha said, just like you indicated, Desiree, we need to start to train our minds to stop, pause, and think, right? Think about, what is the scenario that I'm in? What did I just say out of my mouth? How can I fix that? And how can I train my brain? Because we can train our brain to do things to stop those dangerous stereotypes that cause those biases, so that we can now react and make sure that we're not hiring people that are similar to us, like those similar biases that we have, that we are actually looking at a scope of individuals that are different, that can bring in different talents to the business, but also know that there is something about relationship building. We talk about that too, right? So it's kind of like you do kind of want to have some kind of alliance with somebody, right? But you also want to be able to open your sphere of influence and the people that you work with and the people that you hire, so that you are bringing a diverse talent into your environment that can bring in new ideas and new, because that's what it's all about, right? And I know that Tasha knows that, being in the technology space, it's about those new ideas that really come and create opportunities and businesses for your companies.
Well, I think that's a great thing for Tasha too, in a sense that how's technology changed from when we were young to now, and how do you hire to connect the dots from the young generation, whether it's millennials or Gen Zs, and all the way up to the aging population? Because if we're relying on the communication of the aging population to making sure that they're safe and sound as a form, even though they're running a business, like think of Colonel Sanders. He didn't start Colonel Sanders until 63 years old. And look how big the franchise is for KFC. And so if you think about, well, how could he have used technology, or what would that look like? Yet alone, and not say that the mind is not can handle it, right? And so then if you look at the younger generation that's been handed a phone to be in their life and their entire computer, I mean, you think what our smartphones are capable of back the IBM 360s or the programming that they had, these huge vaults. That ability to navigate, what we read and see on a repetitive basis can drive us to go with it. And it struck me as a chord, Teresa, when you made the comment that, oh no, that's women's work. I just want, I'd love for him to say that, because then it would not, that's a negative thing, because then you're going to go, well, wait a second, my mom did that. How come your mom didn't do that? And the children could then have an honest conversation that we could hear and we could learn from, versus then us being what we could say on a repetitive basis, because eventually we block it out. So for Tasha, the question I have for you is that with technology, are there any kinds of insights that you can share with us, and not to give out secrets, but that can help communication wise that you're doing a dial pad or personally?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's what I'll say. Like, I think smart businesses understand that diverse employee populations build products that appeal to diverse communities, right? So like Dialpad, we're building telephony and collaboration products that are meant to serve everyone, the entire world. So it would never make sense for us to hire, 1,000 people that think exactly the same way, right? So we build our products to be empathetic and to take into consider people of more advanced age, seniors, but also kind of younger population that have grown up with FaceTime as their default way of communication. Different people from different countries. We're selling globally now, so the way our product needs to be empathetic to kind of all different backgrounds, different ways of thought, and age, frankly. So therefore we have hired people that reflect that, right? And I think that that's been probably one of the secret sauces, and maybe not so secret. Most technology companies apply that, right? Because the designers and the product managers who come up with the feature sets, it's really critical that they're diverse, right? We need them to be thinking about how to build products that support all of the very many, backgrounds in the populations that we serve.
Excellent. I mean, one of the things I think is so critical is that I remember when, I was very heavily into real estate back in the early 90s, and they were talking about, it's not that you speak the language or speak Spanish, but you understand the culture. You got to understand the Asian population, that the numbers are very important, and you have all these ways to do with it. So there's one thing to say something, there's other thing to understand the environment you're in and not saying something. So here you're talking about different countries. You're talking about different, what was acceptable to that generation in that country versus what's acceptable today. So you're not only bridging, countries, cultures, generations, and communications form, and that's one of the things that I feel that is so powerful about this council, is you're dealing with the legacies of not only culture, but humanity, how we're communicating with it, how we're embracing each other, how we're keeping that and not becoming atomic of that we have to have that human, otherwise it's going to be a huge, just going to go with it. So very, very cool on that. So one of the other things is, if you go back to judging a book by its cover, that was one of my favorite sayings back in the day, and it really is relatable to now. I remember and when I lived in Alaska in 1976 and 1978, and the gentleman who actually was one of the richest people in Alaska dressed very casual, same clothes every single day. And every day he would go to McDonald's and get $5 worth of lunch. And who was he? He owned Kujiak Electric, which was the main supplier of electric for the entire state of Alaska. So the idea is that you would think he was just an elder man that was walking down, very basic clothing, but like I said, every single day, or the same thing at the same McDonald's for $5. And he took out $5 at the physical bank by himself. So the idea is that when you talk about how you look at someone and you judge them, and how not only how they act and sound, because they could be not the best, like my enunciation, and sometimes I get excited and I go crazy, and then I come back and go, whoa, did you just say that? So it could be relatable to someone else, but not to someone. And how fast you talk. Like one thing I love about Dialpad, I talk very fast. I go, slow down.
Yeah.
Because you go very fast.
The prompts. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, it is one of the greatest things that I love is that it's actually tightening up and refining myself, because I do say what the H or what the, whatever. And I go, whoa, you said that twice. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it also keeps track of how long you're talking, who's doing the most talking, who's saying the positive. And in our line of work, you can't hog the mic. You have to share the mic and hear what they have to say, not project what you do. So for that, thank you.
I know I love the post call summary that gives you a breakdown of who's speaking the most. I rely on that all the time because, like good leaders want to give airtime to their employees and want to hear ideas from everyone, right? And, you shouldn't be speaking 80% of the time. Like at most, I try to speak no more than 20%, right? And that's a work in progress. Like sometimes you find like after your meeting call summary that you've hogged the whole thing and I'm like, what did I do there? Like, why did that happen? So it's really helpful. Like that coaching's been super valuable for me.
Teresa and I love to talk. We get a mic, we go on and on and on and on. So for us, it's been, okay, refine what you're going to say and say it. So I'd like to add in Tammy. Unfortunately, as I said, Tammy's sitting in the airport in between flights, and she says she'd like to pop it in. Praise in public, criticize in private. Focus on the solution, not the problem. You gain far more insight by having better conversations. I always start with something like, I care enough about you to have this conversation. Don't let things build. Have the conversation so you have a chance to build a bridge, not a wall.
Yep.
I think those are very, very powerful. And, Tammy is one of these that gets on an airplane. And if she doesn't speak 4 or 5 times every day at some event going somewhere, and whether it's going as talking to the Girl Scouts that are in that local community versus then just going for her normal business events, but she makes sure that her staff makes sure that she's booked, if she's on an airplane, that she's speaking 3 or 4 times a day. So thank you very much for Tammy. Love that conversation. So if we were to go into, each one of you have had, is there an instance that you can relate to that from a personal experience that you felt that was something that was really, because I love to get into the organicness of that you were at a position that you felt that someone was out of line and you came in and you said, you know what, let's reframe this and what that's going on, because we still see it so often today, and we're seeing it in the media and how it's getting done. It's about the fact checking and not being fact checked, and we see, let's stand up and let's bond together, but then some people use it to say that you're not bonding together using other things. So we have media now, which is such a big deliverable, because now we're very public, because you could say something like right on this call right now is, none of this is a reflection of our company. It's about our personal beliefs and thoughts. How are we going to say that someone took something out of context and then someone says something and it drives a whole nother, did we allow ourselves to say, no, we're in an environment that people are very reactive. So I'd like to have your conversation about, Teresa, we'll start with you first on this. What has it been like to, in your position, you were in the working field as an agent, you're now here and you're the Chief Diversity Equity Inclusion Officer for all of Berkshire Hathaway, Real Living and Home Services of America, and Berkshire Hathaway Home Service of America. And what's that like now that you're on the opposite side in corporate America versus then on going up the food chain?
Well, I mean, it really is no different, right? Because it's me, right? It's the person that's had each position and worked, but you just have to be conscious of how you approach things in a little different level, right? And certainly we are every day having to make sure that we are very politically correct and also very conscious of people and their feelings. So I think it's really important that when you do address a scenario or situation, that you really always take that in mind, and also that there are 3 sides to every story, right? So honestly, that is the number one. I always say there's that opinion and there's this opinion and there's somewhere in the middle, right? So something happened. Even when I say something, it could be interpreted differently to somebody else, right? But that was not my intent of how I said it. So, we all have that. It's very common. And so it's always best to just kind of think about, hey, let me really think about what what she's saying back to me, right? Or what he's saying back to me. And maybe that is the way it came out because I didn't say it right? So sometimes you get so angry that you don't want to realize that, wait a minute, there is something to what that individual said. So let me rethink about it and then apologize if that's the case. Hey, I'm so sorry that that's what happened. Or if there's a scenario where something is going wrong, that you really kind of address it. On a personal basis, I mean, obviously being Hispanic, being Latina, I know that with my mother many years back, she didn't speak English. Okay. She never spoke English. So I was her translator. We would go to a lot of places. And I remember one scenario, and my mother was really more embarrassed about speaking English because my dad, who had been here longer than she had a very thick accent, and people had a hard time understanding him. And so they would often ask him to repeat himself more than once. And my dad would get really angry because people weren't understanding him. So he would get louder and louder instead of, Dad, it's not that you're not, it's just that they can't understand the pronunciation. So I would have to step in. And for my mom, who was very shy, the thought of having someone not understand her was just so scary, right? So she'd rather just speak her language so that somebody would translate for her. But we were at a store, and somebody said, you're in America, you need to speak English here. I mean, and they were really rude. And my mom started to cry. And it really made me so mad that, here somebody, I said, look, we do speak English. I speak English. I was born here in this country. My mom doesn't speak English, but that's because she is scared to speak English because she is fearful that you won't understand her. And how rude of you to be that way. And it took all my courage to do that because I was scared to even say anything. And then when I did that, they were with a child, and their child looked at their mom and said, Mommy, that's kind of mean. And I was like, thank you. It was like I took a child to say, because I mean, my mother started to cry, and she could tell that she had hurt her feelings. And at that moment, I think that changed that perspective for that person who was being mean and, saying things to my mother because of the way that we approached it. I didn't approach it with anger or cussing or anything. I just said, she's just embarrassed about not being able to speak well. And so, we live here, and I'm really upset because you have upset my mother. So, and that really hit the child because the child imagined her mother, right? The mother being in that same shoes. So putting yourself in somebody's shoes is such a significant part of when you're thinking of biases, about how you approach things and how you can correct your behavior so that once you've done it, you can only help but change, right? You can, once you learn what that behavior is, you can't help but change.
Love it. That was very, very emotional. Very cool. Tasha, same question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've experienced a ton of bias myself. And I think, industry, technology, professional environments have come a long way, in the last 20 years or so. I'll share a story that I don't often tell, but sort of one of my first jobs out of college, many years ago, I started out in finance, and I was in a broker training program with, several dozen other folks. And for 6 months, we assisted brokers who had established businesses and financial, brokers, and we helped kind of cold call, try and grow their business, get more customers for them, while we at the same time studied for our Series 7 and Series 63 license. And so a big class cohort doing this all together. We'd meet regularly, to kind of track progress and celebrate wins. The sort of managing partner of this particular bank led these meetings. And so I was one of, I think, 2 females in that group. All the rest were men. And when it came to announce who got the highest score on our Series 7 exam, I didn't know if it was me or not, but I hoped it was. Like, I studied really, really hard for it and got a good grade. And I'll never forget him announcing my name, but then immediately after saying, "You must have studied too hard, and I wonder if your sales numbers have dipped because of it in front of everybody. And I was so stunned, right? I was like, what? Hold on. Like, I think I'm still doing pretty well in sales, right? So I didn't say that, but I was so wounded by that experience. I like almost immediately left that company because I was like, if this is the sentiment from the highest person here, like, I am not going to make a whole bunch of change, and I am not going to beat my head against a wall to do that. So but I did on my way out speak to HR about it. They seemed, not at all concerned about that. And it's actually one of the things that propelled me to get into my profession, because that experience, I felt like, I've been really lucky to be able to go to college. And, I feel like I've had a lot of access, right? And so if someone like myself felt so thwarted in that moment, like many, many others would feel the same. So I knew that industry at that time was not for me. And I immediately went into tech, and I went into HR, and I never looked back. I mean, I felt like I found my home in it, mainly because the people that I've been so lucky to work with have been so progressive. But that said, like, technology still has a long way to go in creating parity for, gender parity as it relates to like leadership positions, and pay equity and all of that. Separate even from unconscious bias. Like, unconscious bias is something that exists in every company in every part of the world. And I think, what we really try hard to do at Dialpad is train on it, accept it as something that is, again, not a condemnation, not a conviction, but rather something that happens, and we're trying to identify it and reprogram against it. And like I said, in all ways that are critical to growing a diverse company, ensure that we have diversity that sort of assesses that. So we have, we have ERGs, employee resource groups. We have Equity, Balance, and Belonging Council that was recently formed, and it's like a true action group where we figure out where are we going to spend our investment dollars, like our dollars that are budgeted towards that. What's the most effective way to do that and fund initiatives that really make an impact? So I think that, but I guess what I'm saying is we've come so far from, in the last 20 years, but there's still a long ways to go. There's still a long ways to go.
So basically you're bringing newness, that it's not technology behind the scenes. You're making sure that it's the forefront of changing, and communication being forethought of embracing it and making it easier versus then being the unknown. So much, technology as a child, I remember, running the card punch machine and going behind the scenes. We went in that box. What happens in that box? No one knew what happened in that box. It was all kept in that box. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. The idea is that now you're bringing it open and saying, no, we are going to have actionable items that we can help in our initiatives that we want to bring, but also that communication is going to show that it's your partner, it's an adjunct versus then thee. And that's what I love about that conversation, that, as, like you said, I mean, we saw Google where they did the AI for hiring, went through 60,000 resumes, and all the women were thrown out because of the programmers who set up the algorithm go with it. Okay, we need to change that. If Chicha were here, she'd be talking about how, that the fact is that we look at STEM as the actual physical element, that we're not designing them for women, we're designing them for men, but having women be part of the team. What does that look like for the environment? And then with our final question, I was thinking about when we talk about, we look at the environment, what about the size? How soft-spoken? You talked about Teresa, the fear of even speaking because mom was so soft-spoken. All of us that are on the call right now, we have voices. We can say very loud and we can be very strong. Desiree, can you go in another room? We can hear you down the block, because I'm just speaking my normal language, right? My normal tone, my normal thought, but soft-spoken, shorter. How we dress, our appearance, right? Are you, dressed in this beautiful outfit, or are you just casual? We always allow the men to be, oh, you look great, unshaven and rugged and have this decor. Well, you have to have this all together. But that being said, with our size, how big and whether we're in shape or not, these are all biases that we don't talk about enough. To say that, wait, are we look at the blind, the voice, blind singers, how we're doing it. Look, it's audio social, think about social audio, that the environment that you can't see the person talking, you can be that person talking because you have no idea how they look. So that being said, my last question to you, do you think social audio is going to really make a big difference? Because it is really naturally what we started with without the visual side. Do you think it's going to give a voice better for women and all different, because you're not going to be able to see them, you're going to be able to hear them? I mean, look at Clubhouse. I absolutely love Clubhouse. It has been a forum that so many people told me that it is a perfect shake for what I do and how I do it, and bringing and dropping those golden nuggets and being very short, quick, and intersecting, go like that. How do you feel about something like that as far as addressing, the unconscious bias? And because we can't see, we can just hear, and how you react. So Tasha, I guess start with you on the communication side.
Yeah. So I guess your question is like relying on non-video sort of platforms to share ideas, and what do I think the impact is? Well, so first, like, I love video because I feel like it drives better engagement. So I'm partial to video for that reason. Like I feel like I know you better because I get to see you. So I think there's some trade-off to not having video as part of that sort of enriched experience. But I will agree with you that like the video in itself provides a lot of opportunity for bias and scrutiny. So like, when I'm on calls, and it's funny, I'm working out of like a small bedroom that's been painted like almost black. And I don't have, I haven't had time to put pictures up or make it, homey. Every single time I meet with someone, they're like, wow, you must be pretty rigid, or are you a minimalist, or like, what's going on with your back? And I'm like, no, I just like, we've had construction. I haven't been able to like do this up, So it's interesting, like the inferences we make on all things, right? Like, what's the background look like? Oh, that bed's not made. I bet you they're pretty sloppy at work, like lots of things like that happen when you turn on video in sort of collaboration moments like this. So I will say that, there's a lot of opportunity for bias in video calls. So I'll just call that out. I also love Clubhouse. I also love like education opportunities that happen when you get to turn off your visual mind and only listen, right? And so I'm a crazy, Audible fan. I listen to tons of podcasts, and that medium is great for me for retaining information, because I'm not firing on all cylinders. I'm sort of listening. I've turned off a lot of like other parts of my brain that aren't needed necessarily. So I agree with you that I love that. And I think that certainly removing video helps to remove bias, so I like it for that reason. But I'm, for team meetings and things like that, I'm partial to having video, because I can read a lot more of what's going on, with my team.
You can physically see them, and you can see what they're doing. Are they on their phone? Are they paying attention to me? Are they looking somewhere else? Because I don't believe that we have to be present. That's one of our NDILC principles. We have to be, if we're not physically in the mindset of looking, understanding, and absorbing, then we're losing it, because, oh yeah, you said that. Well, you had to repeat it twice, why, and go with it. But I do love the same with Clubhouse. I'll put it on when I'm doing the laundry, doing the dishes, whatever. And because it's my new news feed of being a real conversations. And like you said, there'd be a golden nugget, or something says something, I never thought of it that way, or, oh, that's a great opportunity, or, oh, I'd love to hire that person. Love. And there's rooms that I don't go in, and there's rooms that I make sure. So love that conversation about Clubhouse to go with it. So Teresa, same question to you.
Yes, thank you, Desiree. And Tasha, I love the comment as well. I think that audio is good in some instances, and it's not good in others. I think I agree in that. First of all, think about my father, who had a horrible accent. And if the only way that you were able to communicate with him in speaking English, you would not understand what he was saying, but you could see his verbal, his communication, right? It does form prejudgments when you have visual. Now, I have a gray screen because I was teaching a class, and they required my back screen to be just solid, because otherwise, that my background is actually full of a lot of color and items, right? And so, it does form preconceived ideas about who you are and whoa, wow, like, what's that painting or that artwork or whatever. So it does get to give you some insight into somebody's personality that can be good or bad, right? The Audible side, though, also helps you, especially if you're listening to Audible, like you were talking about. There are readers that love to read a book and listen to the book, right? Because it formed their own visual idea of what somebody looked like or what that room looked like, or you didn't have it. That's why a lot of people don't love to have a book transition into a movie, because it's not the idea that they had formed in their minds. So it just depends, I think, a lot on the individual. But I do think that you can also form stereotypes, especially think about me, who is Southern. I speak with a little bit of a Southern accent, right? And sometimes that forms a prejudgment to somebody if that's all they had to hear. And also those that have the accents of different parts of the country, Bostonians. I mean, all of that could really affect stereotypes. So I think it really depends. I don't know. I think it's all great that we have all forms of being able to communicate, and that we need to have that for independent processes, depending on how we are going to be communicating and what the outcome needs to be. That's just me. I just think but I love more than anything being in person and getting to see somebody in person and talking to them and, and being able to connect. That's my form, the best form to me.
The trueness of that is that you get to the 21 sensors go off, right? All the different environments, other than just the main 5, but all the elements and climates and everything that affect us. But also the idea is that this is better than not having any outside the walls and be able to see people and actually communicate. So the visual side, but the audio. So sometimes it gives us eyes a rest, and then sometimes we get to hear, and then it's too much and we need to sit down and just smell the roses, right? And so that in-person thing is a way just to have a calming effect, because as human beings, we were brought up to be next to the mom's heart and just sit there and cuddle. And that is a way of having that true, that you feel the endorphins go, okay, I feel synergized. That's why that human touch is so powerful. So to go with it. So thank you. This has been so much fun. And always, the principles were really set up. If you think about, we've already covered acknowledge trailblazers, keep achieving, believe, pass the torch, know yourself with Marsha last month, speak out. So this month, everything is about speak out. So if all of us that are watching this, and also on YouTube and Anchor and iTunes and everywhere this goes, every time you see that, please put hashtag speak out, the NDILC principles, and share this video and share the information that you can help. If we all take a stand and be kind, smile, give hope, and be courteous and say, how can we change the narrative? How can we help each other? Because all the isms that are going on, we did the NDILC isms of sexism and racism and ageism and everything that goes in. And we need to, especially with all the fracturing with the countries and fracturing within our own communities and political divides, and we could go on. This is about helping each other be human, be collective, and our quality of life has to get so much better. And a form of communication, and that's why I love these organic and not predetermined and just, going out there. So thank you very much. Again, next month is going to be listen. Next week, we're going to have the delegates get on board and talk about in the weeds, we call it. So, and continuing the quality of life. So thank you all very much. And thank you to Dial Pad and Berkshire Hathaway and Forum of the NDILC. Have a very blessed and healthy environment that we can all live in. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.